Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Social Media Branded, hosted by me, Theo Bransell. I'm an entrepreneur, speaker, author, and social media expert. And today I'm joined again by someone who is started to become a friend, Frank McKinny. Welcome,
I,
Frank.
I was just saying before we hit record that I've done thousands of interviews, TV and radio and internet. I've never done 3 interviews with the same person. So this is going to be uncharted territory, but I'm happy to do it. I think you're a fantastic individual. I think you represent a very important generation, and anything I can do for you and and actually anybody who's listening, but really the younger generation, I think is really important to me right now, because I have a daughter that's 21 and I try to give her the best I can so she has a good life.
Yeah, and if I'm not wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but she became the president of the university that she went to.
Yeah, so in the United States, you have a student body, and that student body is the governing entity over all the students. And in the case of Penn State University, there's 46,000 students, over 46,000 students, and she was elected president. She just finished her term because she just graduated from college, but she was president for 2019, 2020.
Well, so I don't really understand the United States school system that much, but did she become the student representative, or did she become the president of the whole school?
President of the whole student body and the representative at the board of trustees. So yes, she's the one who is elected by all 46,000, or whoever decides to vote. And then she represents those students with the faculty at the board of trustees meetings. Like, she's one of the few students that is at those meetings. So it was a full-time job. I think I never even heard about her classes. All I heard about was, she would do 6 or 7 meetings a day that had to do with her position, and then had to go to class. So I don't know how she did it.
Wow, that's really impressive.
You know what you should do? You should interview her. I think it'd be really interesting to hear, a leader at 21 years old. You're 18. I think that would be a really interesting discussion.
Yeah. Could you set that up possibly?
Yeah, sure. You should just follow her on social media, and then I'll tell her that you're going to contact her.
Yeah, great. So one of the reasons I wanted to bring you back a third time for another interview is that last time we spoke, if people haven't listened to it, go back and listen to that one and the first one. But we spoke a lot about your personal spirituality journey, and also the importance of having a spiritual side to your life.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you back is because you are a really accomplished person, and you are one of the most successful people in the business world when it comes to the real estate side. And I want to just get your take on how do you do it?
How do I do what?
Basically balancing the personal and the business aspect of everything.
Okay, so here's the thing. Many people assume that I have this wonderful balance in my life. Human beings, as a species, we're not meant to be in balance. So we become very frustrated, very anxious, very depressed, very eager to try to seek that perfect balance. And I realized about a decade ago that as I was striving to be find a balance between my home life with my family, and my daughter being, that at that time I was still walking her to school every day. By the way, I walked my daughter to school every day for 10 years, 1,652 times, for those of you who didn't get that part of the interview before. And then trying to balance my hobby, which is ultra marathon running, which is these races over 100 miles at a time, nonstop, so you're running for a day and 2 days straight. So it's not just the races, it's trying to balance the training, and then running a fairly large charity over, well, we run it from here, but we build villages in Haiti and then my business. And I realized, you know, I'm rarely in balance, and I think it's very unusual for a human being to find that perfect balance, and it's okay. It's okay not to be in balance. And we, when we're pursuing something, I guess the most simple example I can give is when a woman's pregnant. You know, her whole life is out of balance, but in the end, it's for a beautiful cause. It's for a beautiful ending. And I think that, you know, life is just like that. I mean, we're working on something. It might be longer than 9 months, like a pregnancy, but then we're off to pursue something else. So I find that balance swings like a pendulum, and most of the time we're way out of balance on this side, and then sometimes we're going to swing back, and we're going to be way out of balance on this side of our life because we're eager to start a new business, we're eager to start a new family, we're eager to start and we're running a big charity, we're eager to pursue our hobby. Very few times does that pendulum stop in the center, and that's okay. I think when I realize it's okay not to be in balance, it's okay not to you know, I don't want to feel frustrated because I'm seeking balance every single day of my life. I think if you learn that at an early age, you'll avoid a lot of anxious moments. Maybe, you know, for people who are suffering depression and things, if you realize it's okay not to be in balance, and while you're pursuing something that is meaningful for you, using that pregnancy as an example, I think it's okay to swing the pendulum one way too far and the other way too far. The pendulum of life is constantly swinging back and forth. It's never meant to be equilibrium in the center.
So, for everything that you've ever done, I'm trying to organize my thoughts. So everything you've ever done, has it been that you do one thing and one thing only, and then you focus on that only?
No. But there's always something that grabs more of your attention than something else. So I am in every day of my existence right now at this stage of my life. I'm working on I was working on selling my final masterpiece, which was a $14 million oceanfront house that I built on speculation. That's what I do. I build houses on the ocean on speculation. I've been doing that on the ocean, I've been doing it for 28 years, and I've done it in real estate in general for over 30 years. So I'm working on that every day, Theo. I'm working on my charity. That probably takes up 30% of my time, which is the building of these self-sufficient villages in Haiti, where we just finished a big COVID campaign raising money for Haiti, and we've exceeded what we thought we would be able to raise. And then right now I'm not training for a race, so that part is kind of on hold because most races have been canceled because of COVID. So no, I am touching aspects of my life on a daily basis. And of course, I'm organizing my time around that. But for example, we just sold the house on the ocean. I think when we first started interviewing, it wasn't sold, and it has since been sold, and I no longer own it. So you can imagine for those couple weeks how completely out of balance my life was, focusing on closing that transaction. Everything else took a back seat. But being okay with that, knowing that was short term, and I was able to get back to some of the things in life that were being neglected. I didn't beat myself up over the fact that I was out of balance for those few weeks.
So you essentially give something the most amount of attention that it needs, and then you just everything else you don't put on hold, but you slow that down and give it as little attention as possible to you, but enough to manage it.
Yeah, enough to manage it. I will make sure. Now, the other thing that allows me to do that is I don't structure. Let's just say I work 8 hours a day, which sometimes I work more, sometimes I work a lot less. I don't structure all 8 hours. It's very important to structure and to schedule open time in your daily calendar, meaning nothing goes on the calendar for, like I have this with you at 1 o'clock Eastern time that'll run for an hour, and then I have nothing structured, nothing set until 4 o'clock Eastern time. It's not like I'm going to sit around and with nothing to do for those 2 hours, but that's where I might journal. I might read a little bit. I might think about what follow-up I'm going to do from the sale that we just had, what's going to happen with the, my next real estate venture, if any. So make sure you schedule unscheduled time.
Yeah. And have you always been doing this, or is this something you've learned along with the process?
No, I haven't always been doing this. By the way, let me just spin the camera around real quick. So last time we came, I'm on a PC, so I can't. I'm wired right now. I don't have a separate camera. But can you see the ocean?
Wow. Yeah.
So this is my tree house. I know we talked last time about my treehouse where I wrote all my books from. Let's fix the camera here, and where I designed all the houses from for the last 18 years. So part of you asked the question, have I always been like that? One of the reasons I work from this treehouse is so I can create an environment that draws out ingenuity and creativity. Like over my shoulder here, turn it. There's a shower. There's a bathroom. There's a sink in there. It's right there. It's just to my left. And then above my head is a loft where if I was very busy writing my books and I didn't want to be interrupted and I was tired, I could go take a rest and then start writing again. And there's 12 windows that look out. You can see behind me the beautiful trees. So I created an environment that was conducive to drawing out my creativity and ingenuity. And I suggested everybody do that. Of course, not for everybody can it be a tree house, but finding a place that allows you to draw out that creativity and ingenuity. And also, I don't have any distractions up here, Tio. I have no distractions. So my time is extremely efficient. I think I mentioned to you, or I'm not sure if it was your interview, but how I've become so efficient with my time and my endeavors that I'm 3 chess moves ahead of almost everybody that I come in contact with. It's a little frustrating. It's a little lonely, and I'm not trying to be egotistical, but literally you take a pawn or a rook or a king or a queen if you're a chess player, and a good chess player is always thinking 3 or 4 moves ahead of his competitor. Well, I am 3 or 4 moves, not 4. I'm probably 2 or 3 moves ahead of anybody I come in contact with during the day. And it's primarily because this environment allows me to be extremely creative and ingenious, and it allows me to put off all distractions. There's no television in here. I don't have any of that. I have a bathroom, a sink, and a shower. I've got a king-size bed, but other than that, I have no distractions other than looking out at the ocean every now and then, and that doesn't distract me. That's where I get my inspiration.
Yeah. Okay. So you created this place of creativity, and that's where you've done everything creatively ever.
Well, not ever, but I haven't, like, the best evidence of being successful or the best evidence of backing up, finding a place to draw out your creativity and ingenuity. Like, that is an opinion of mine, right? That you need to find a place like that. And you could take my opinion or not take my opinion. But all 6 of my books I wrote from this treehouse. I hadn't written a book. I've been in business a long time. I'm going to say 30 some years. My first book came out, 18 years ago. So, and that's when I built my treehouse. So every one of these books was written from this desk right here. And I know it has a lot to do with creating a space that allowed me to write the 6 books. And we, for those of you who didn't see the first episode or second episode, there's 5 different genres in those 6 books. I mean, there's 5 different topics, there's 5 different subjects. And if you look up the definition of author in the dictionary, it's derived from the word authority. So anybody who writes a book is considered an authority on what they've written on. That's where the word author comes from. So I'm considered an expert or at least an authority on 5 different genres, 5 different topics. Tio, that probably wouldn't have happened had I not created this environment in which, surrounded by this and surrounded by nature and surrounded by things that drew up my creativity, I could write a book on philosophy. I could write 2 books on real estate. I could write a book on young reader fantasy. I could write a book on spirituality, and my 6th book was on Christian romance. And I think it's a testimony to exactly what I'm professing and imploring people, is to find that place. Even if you work in an office, you know, you work for somebody else, create that, and you work in a cubicle, do something to your cubicle that will allow you to draw out that creativity and ingenuity.
Yeah. Uh, and one of the things I want to talk about is your books. As you said, 5 genres, 6 different books. And do you have a reason for why you wrote each book? Or...
Oh yeah, I do. I really do. And I think one thing I rarely get a chance to do, even when I'm speaking from a stage, I'll mention it at the end, you know, because we'll often offer the books at the back of the room when I'm done speaking. I never get a chance to talk about what makes them different. You know, I tell people to go on my website and read about it, but if I just take them in order, so my first book, which I went back to this color hair, by the way, just a different style. My first book is Make It Big. This is more of a philosophical book. This book came out 18 years ago, and yet it was way ahead of its time because there's 49 chapters. That's where it says 49 secrets for building a life of, I know it's kind of glary, but 49 secrets for building a life of extreme success. Each one of these chapters is only 7 or 8 pages long. This book, for people who are just getting started, I've recommended this book to many young people because you know you really haven't gotten too far in your career, and this is how to get that mind right. You know, this is more philosophical approach to extreme success. Mind you, the subtitle says 49 secrets for building a life of extreme success. Not building a business, but building a life. So this book really was so far ahead of its time. It still outsells all my other books because of it's just timeless. And then so when I finished, and there's a little bit of real estate in here, but it doesn't matter the line of work you're in, Tio. It's important that we get our mind right, and it's just a fantastic book. You can use it like an oracle, by the way, meaning you don't have to read from chapter 1 to 49. You can start at chapter 22 and jump back to chapter 16 and go ahead to 46. So that came out 18 years ago, and it did very well.
Sorry to interrupt, but do you have a favorite chapter or thing that you went through in that book?
I do. I have 2 favorite chapters, and these have followed me everywhere. Chapter 25 that says, make sure I got this right. They made the type so much smaller. The book is pretty thin, but when it first came out, the type was bigger, so there was more pages, and then I had to reprint it a bunch of times, and now the type is smaller. Oh yeah, so chapter 20 says, chapter 25, gently yet often exercise your risk tolerance like a muscle. Eventually, it will become stronger and able to withstand greater pressure. We talked about that on the first interview and the second interview. It's all about exercising your risk tolerance like a muscle. And then chapter 32 says, let me see. Yeah, many of us are fortunate to be blessed with the ability to succeed at some level. Yet those blessings aren't meant for our sole benefit, but in order to benefit others who will likely not succeed at our level. It's a long title for a chapter, but it's right there. It's very long. Those are my favorite 2. But you know what? Lately, I've been quoting a lot where, you know, never grow up and consistently renew. Resist the temptation to act like an adult. Never lose a little boy or a little girl inside. All these are things I've been quoting lately. So that's my. That book really launched all the other ones. But and I think had I not written a book, more of a philosophical book with real estate anecdotes sprinkled throughout, my publisher back then would have never said, hey, Frank, it's great that you fancy yourself a philosopher, but what you really are, what you're really known for is real estate. So they said, write a real estate book. And this is the only paperback book that I wrote. This is called Frank McKinney's Maverick Approach to Real Estate Success. And the subtitle, how you can go from a $50,000 fixer-upper to a $100 million mansion. So this was really that step-by-step, how to really go from a $50,000 fixer-upper, which I started with, and I actually designed a $100 million spec house. I never sold it. I sold the land before the house came out of the ground. But this one came out in like 4 or 5 years later. And this one, for those who are in real estate, I would read this book first because I wrote 2 real estate books. And then I took a break for a bit, about 3 years. And then I wrote 3 books at the same time.
And released it on the same day.
Yeah, and released on the same day. And it was 3 different genres. And it took me 18 months to write them. And then we released them, you know, maybe a couple months after that. So it was a 20-month process. And they were all over the place. The first one was my young reader fantasy novel, Dead Fred Flying Lunchboxes in the Good Luck Circle. This was based on the fact that I walked my daughter to school 1,652 times. Let me tell you something in fiction. Every work of fiction is rooted in some form of reality in the mind of the author. Something happened in reality whereby the even fiction, like Stephen King, for example, a lot of these things happened to Stephen King when he was younger. So this book, if I was to have a favorite, I love this book. A lot of people thought, Frank, you're a real estate guy. What in the world are you doing writing a young reader fantasy novel? And this book competed with Harry Potter, Twilight, Hunger Games, Narnia, you know, all of those back in the day. And I was never more creative than I was in the content of writing this book. What's odd about this book is, even though it's a young reader fantasy novel with the average or the suggested reading age of 9 years old and up, out of every 10 books of these that were sold, 2.5, meaning 25%, were read by adults over 18. So it's not just a book for kids. And there's a lot of education that goes on in the book about underwater creatures and things, because the whole scene is set in South Florida. So a lot of schools made this required reading because of the subliminal education that was going on of the young reader, while they were being entertained by the story.
What's the book? What's the story about?
It is about a protagonist. This is the main character in the book. Her name is Peaky, double P, double E, double K, who finds a small shiner fish, which is this little fish right here, and he's alive and he talks. And what he does is he encourages her, he challenges her to help him, because he's tiny. He's a dead shiner fish that talks, to find the courage to overthrow a megalodon. Now, a megalodon, for those of you who don't know, it was a prehistoric shark that was bigger than a school bus, and it had teeth bigger than your hand. And in my story, it comes back to life. One of the reasons so many parents bought this book for their children is because this very shy little girl from Indiana had to come up with the friends that she had never met. So these are 2 little friends of hers. She had to come up with the courage and a plan to overthrow and vanquish a amphibious megalodon. So this megalodon didn't just live in the water, it could live on land as well. And it was wreaking havoc in this underwater world known as high voltage, where this Dead Fred, King Frederick III was his name. And that whole process, she was shy, she was intimidated. I'm not going to ruin the story, but suffice it to say, she found a way to save high voltage through courage in overthrowing Megalodon. And Megalodon had henchmen. Megalodon had evil, an evil army that she had to learn to overthrow. And that whole story of courage is why that book, I think, was so popular with school-aged children and parents.
It's a really interesting title.
Yeah, so Dead Fred is the little shiner fish. That's King Frederick III. Flying lunchboxes. You can see the lunchboxes being escorted by the flying fish. That's a whole story in the book. It's fantastic. And the Good Luck Circle. Any time that the children stepped inside this Good Luck Circle, which is this, they had powers to be able to go underwater and breathe by way of these giant spider helmets. Like there are water spiders that actually are able to go underwater by blowing these bubbles over their head. Well, in this story, once they stepped on the circle, these massive spiders would blow these bubbles over the kids' heads, and they were able to go underneath the water and do what they needed to do to get rid of this megalodon. I designed this book cover like a movie poster, because I tried really, really hard to get this made into a movie. And I still am not giving up, even though the book's been out for about 9 years. But it's written in real time. So it is written like a movie script would have been written. It doesn't jump ahead 5 years or back 5 years. It starts and runs real time all the way through the story. I love that book. I love that book. I got to read that story again. And then on the same day, my TAP book came out. The TAP, which we've talked about before, To Whom Much is Entrusted, Much is Expected. This is the spiritual book. This is how to succeed in the business of life, not just the business of business. And the endorsement, it says, our prayers are answered. McKinney reveals how responsible stewardship guarantees success in the business of life. And that was from my mentor, Rich DeBoss, who at the time was the 65th richest person in the world, the founder of Amway, among other, owner of the Orlando Magic basketball team, among other things. So this book is probably the most meaningful book to me because of how many lives it changed. Teaching people how to recognize life's great tap moment when God comes down and tap you on the shoulder. And then once you recognize that tap moment, instead of pushing it off, how to act on it. So this changed more lives, I think, and I felt a bigger responsibility in writing this book. Then the last book that came out on the same day was my book, Burst This. This is everything up until that point. And I got to say, I haven't added a lot of knowledge since then, everything I know in real estate. So how many times have we heard about the bubble bursting in real estate? It's a bubble, it's going to burst. Well, I went back and I studied 6 different real estate cycles dating back to the mid-70s to show how long these real estate cycles last, what brings on the ascent of a bubble, what causes these bubbles to burst, and what to look for when real estate has troughed, and maybe that's the time to get in and buy. This is a very, there's a lot of research that went into this book, very academic book, but the subtitle says it all. Frank McKinney's bubble-proof real estate strategies. Okay, so I wanted you to be able to invest in real estate and feel safe that you weren't going to lose money, you know, because when a bubble bursts, people lose money. And so I made sure, Teal, that every word, all 300 some pages, delivered on the promise of the title. Burst this. Like, in other words, try to burst this. Try to burst this investment portfolio by applying Frank McKinney's bubble-proof real estate strategy. So every word that I wrote in all these pages delivers on the promise of the title. And this book had a huge resurgence recently during COVID because people were concerned about it being another bubble. And, you know, going into COVID and during COVID and now after COVID, this book has never been more relevant. And of all the books that have spiked in sales during COVID, and I watch those things, it has been this real estate book. And then the last book that came out just last year, this was a huge departure for me, going back to kind of the spiritual side, but Christian romance, is titled The Other Thief. This was very edgy. This is very evocative. This was very graphic. It was a very graphic book based on chapter 20, Luke chapter 23, verse 33 through 43 in the Bible. But to me, it was the greatest showing of love in the entire Bible, that chapter and verse, Luke 23, verse 33 through 43. Read it if you want to see the most beautiful outpouring of love. And so what I did is I turned it into a modern day version of what The Other Thief endured. And I got a lot of heat for this book. It didn't sell through as well because the Christian reader said, "Hey, Frank, we love the Christian story. We love the Christian, you know, the Bible passages and all that stuff that you put in there, but it's too graphic for me. It's just too graphic. Why did you have to be so graphic with the fall from grace? Because this character is he's a Christian singer, and he rose from singing to 20 people in a tiny little church to singing to 20,000 in a Christian setting. And so he's evangelizing with his song. But the devil, through the 7 deadly sins, which we've all heard of, tries to bring him down. And you can kind of imagine, you can see one of the 7 deadly sins kind of has itself wrapped around the other thief. This is Christ, by the way. I obscured Christ because there's so many books about Christ. This was more about a fall from grace through one of the 7 deadly sins getting through. But as I portray these 7 deadly sins attacking a human being, just like you and me, was intimidated by that, maybe even put off. And then the secular reader said, Frank, man, do we love this Fall from Grace. This is the good stuff. I love going to the race to watch the crash. I don't like watching the race. I want to see the crash. And this guy crashes and burns. But why did you have to put in so many Bible passages? It's just too religious for me. So it didn't seem to satisfy either one, but I needed to be true to what I want. My publisher said the same thing. Frank, pick one. Be a romance writer or be a Christian writer, but you can't be both. And I said, I can't sell my soul like that. I have to be true to this story of grace, mercy, love, forgiveness, and redemption.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to pick up any of the books, they can go to the Disneyland of the website.
They could go, yeah. Best thing to go to Disney, right?
FrankMcKinney.com.
Where are we going to go? We're going to Disney. Frank
Yeah.
dash McKinney.
Frank.
Put the dash in there. FrankMcKinney.com. The cool thing about going there, besides feeling like you're at Disney, is you can read a sample chapter of every one of those books. You can do the same thing on Amazon as well.
Yeah.
And before we move off the books, good, Tio, if you bought any one of these 6, all the proceeds go to the Caring House Project Foundation. So, for example, if you bought the tap for $25, it provides about 200 meals in one of our orphanages in Haiti.
Yeah. So, with everything that you've ever created, do you have a set structure or a strategy for how you go about, for example, creating a house from the bottom up or writing a book from scratch?
I think the thing I mentioned about the title of each book is very similar to what I do with the real estate. So let me explain what that means. So sometimes it takes me weeks to come up with burst this, Frank McKinney's bubble-proof real estate strategies. And then the image is very important on the cover. The tap. Obviously, that's a very important image. That's a painting from the Sistine Chapel. So I need to, like in a house, I'm going to come up with an architectural style, a design, a size, a height, a curb appeal before I even begin to market the place, right? So it's like coming up with a title, not a title to the house, but I lay all that out first. I won't start writing a book until I get a title in my mind. And sometimes that takes a long time to get. And then, like in The Other Thief, this jacket cover took 4 months to get right, to actually design and to do the photo shoot for this. If you remember a movie called Passion of the Christ, it was a very popular movie many years ago. The same artist that did the posters for Passion of Christ did my book cover for this. So it's really important for those people getting into business is to, I mean, Stephen Covey said it in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, is to begin with the end in mind. And that is a really important thing that I do with my books. I did the same thing with the charity. Like I identified, well, where's the poorest place that's closest to me in Florida? And the answer was Haiti. It's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And what do you want to do there? Well, I want to provide a self-sustaining existence. I don't want to be a charity. I want to be a self-sufficient entity for the people in Haiti. And then we backfill that, Theo. We backfill that with all the process.
So you always start for, I'm a little confused if you start with the titles of the books for how you got to the title of your fiction book.
Yeah, I mean, you could go back even a step further. Is okay. What does the general public, the reading public, what do I think they need to hear? A good example was this. I mean, we're in a time right now that grace and mercy and love, forgiveness and redemption. Look at the world right now. It's a place that's addicted to conflict. It's vile. It's a tough place to be right now. And again, this book came out right at the start of this kind of turn in sentiment. And I felt like if I could write a fiction, a novel that really showed an individual who, whether or not he was worthy of grace, mercy, love, forgiveness, and redemption, he was offered it. So that's kind of how I would approach it. The other part, I mean, each one of these, if you think about it, I don't want you to lose money in real estate. So here's how not to lose money. Here's how to make money. Burst this. Those kind of things I think people want to hear. And then, and it's timely. And then I'll come up with a title. And then from there, I write the book.
So you believe
like right
that,
now.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say right now, I've been toying around for a couple years with this book titled "The Bastardization of the First Amendment." Just how in our country, how the First Amendment, which is the right to free speech, I want to go back like 50, 60 years and show how it evolved. It's fascinating to me the way that free speech is now completely different than it was 50 years ago, especially in the media. And I want to go back. It'll be a very academic book. I mean, it'll be a very, I have to do a ton of research on it. But to me, I think it will be very fascinating to people to see how the First Amendment in the United States has changed over those 50 or 60 years. And why did it change? And again, that would be an opinion. But I think with my research, I'd be able to show why the First Amendment, the right to free speech in America, has changed so much over that time. And that could be my next book.
So that's something you are thinking about doing seriously.
I was thinking about that when I wrote The Other Thief, and I figured, you know what, I need to deliver that grace, mercy, love, forgiveness, and redemption before I get into how and it is an evocative title, the bastardization of the First Amendment, like really how it's changed. I'm not saying it doesn't fulfill what our forefathers intended when they amended the Constitution and gave free speech, but it sure has changed a lot. And with America being the world's superpower and speech, influencing everything we do, I think it'd be very interesting for people to read how did that superpower's ability to express itself through free speech, how did it evolve? And why did it evolve the way it did?
Do you have your thoughts and opinions of it organized? I was thinking if you wanted to talk a little bit about it now.
I don't have enough because I need to be able to represent facts before I can represent opinion. And I want to, no, I don't have enough. I just know that I've been around long enough to see it change, and especially with the advent of social media and how it's affected even more recently the riots in the United States. That's all a matter of free speech that has caused for a class of people that have been discriminated against to rise up. And if we didn't have that in the form that we have it now, the change that's sorely needed in the United States when it comes to racial injustice wouldn't have taken place. I think that's fascinating because 20 years ago, hell, when I was first watching the news when I was a little boy, there was no such thing as what I now refer to or have learned about as advocacy journalism. Advocacy journalism. There's no pure journalism anymore. No matter what platform you're watching on, and let's say you're watching in the United States on the big platform, the Fox News and CNBC and MSNBC and CNN and all of those, they're all they advocate for a position, and it used to be and I think that's why my daughter shifted her desire to be in front of the camera. Like she wanted to be a newscaster. She doesn't want to be one anymore because she'd have to advocate for a platform regardless of the news station that she was working for. And she didn't want to do that, basically selling her soul. And to me, I think that will be a fascinating study. The more I talk about it, the more, I was so focused on selling that house up until recently that I haven't done anything with this book idea, but it's been back there for years now, a couple of years. Timing is right.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, you need your a small vacation for the 4th of July. But it will definitely be fascinating
Yeah.
if you decide,
But I think,
if you decide to write the book.
you know, you're right, but I think you yes, your 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 viewers could probably care less about some of the stuff I'm saying, but I want them to understand that for those who didn't see the first or the second interview, I came out of high school with a 1.8 grade point average. So in the United States, that's barely above failing. And I didn't have the benefit of going to college or pursuing any kind of formal education. I had no network. I came to Florida with $50 and a one-way plane ticket. Everything I owned was in a duffel bag. So yeah, no network, no money, no education, no friends. But all of these things I'm referring to, all these books I keep holding up, and now this, I don't even know what genre the bastardization of the First Amendment would be. It'd be a sixth genre, it'd be a new genre. All those things are possible, right? That all those things I've made come true, not because of my education or my financial background. It's because of who I've made myself become. It was the character, it was the reality that I created for myself. And I believe that will be so academic, that will be so, highly educational, like meaning I'll have to do all this research. I am intimidated by it. Just like I was intimidated to sit on the board of governors for a college. I sat on the board of governors for a college for 12 years. And when they first asked me, I'm like, you're asking me to be on your board. But, I said yes more than no. It's one of the chapters in Make It Big, say yes more than no. And now there's really nothing that I don't think I could do. I'm not intimidated. I am intimidated by it, but the challenge to write a book that's that deep and that, academic, I use the word, the same thing could happen for your viewers. I'm not a gifted individual. I'm a very simple human being that believes in healthy ego to believe in himself. A healthy ego is defined very simple. There's two things that define a healthy ego. One is believing you're one of the best in the world at what you do. So I believe I'm one of the best in the world at what I do. Having a burning passion for whatever that is. Actually, there's three things. So believing you are one of the best in the world at what you do. If you think you're the best, you have a unhealthy ego. Don't ever think you're the best in the world. I'm one of the best at building houses on the ocean on speculation. I'm one of the best authors. I am not the best. I have a burning passion for each one of those subjects, and I have a burning passion for the houses that I build. And the third element, and this is the one people have the most trouble with, is don't be afraid to tell the world about it. You can't be afraid to toot your own horn, to get out in front of your story and tell it yourself, allowing other people to absorb it. And then oftentimes you'll have people like Tio inviting you on their program, and they're validating your worth. So when you do those kind of things in that order, believing this is healthy ego, believing you're one of the best in the world, having a burning passion for it, and not being afraid to tell the world that you are one of the best in the world at it, what gets in your way? I mean, what could possibly get in your way? What could stop you from attempting to do these things? Nothing.
Yeah. Is this something you've been taught by someone, or is it something that you realized through self-reflection?
Yeah, there's a difference between being a lifelong learner and a lifelong student. A learner learns by observing. A student sits in a classroom his whole life and kind of maybe never comes out of the classroom. Like they never apply what they've observed. So I'm a keen observer because I didn't get a chance to sit in a real classroom. And the people that I look up to, the people that I've admired over the years, seem to have developed the same ability to create their own reality. And it's a lonely process. It can create a lot of self-doubt because people are telling you that you're crazy, that Frank, why are you writing a book on Christian romance? You are a real estate person. Nobody's going to buy that book. Well, you got to tune that out, and you've got to believe in the message that you're delivering or the product that you're building, regardless of how, I mean, how many times, look at how I dress. I mean, people, and the way I wear, they think this guy's, he should be in a band, or he should be a painter or something. I am an artist. There's no doubt. All of life is a canvas to me. I just don't happen to be able to play an instrument or sing or sculpt. I'm painting, but I don't paint very well. But I found life, when you approach life like an artist would approach his craft, anything is possible.
Yeah, and that's definitely been one of the top things that you've taught me, is approach life as if you're an artist, and the things that come from it. I mean, the world just opened up for even more possibility because of it, and it's really fascinating since I realized that.
It's so fascinating, and if you realize that at 18, I mean, I didn't realize it until maybe I was 20 years older than you, you know? I started getting it in my late 30s. So I think but you know what? It all boils down to the quality of life that you desire. And by taking an artist approach to your craft, to life in general, I found that it has enhanced my quality of life and my happiness.
Yeah. And shortly, speaking of happiness, which has been something we've spoken on all interviews, is I shortly mentioned that I talked to a man named Alan Bernard, and briefly, I told you briefly about him. But one of the things that he mentioned was that to have happiness, you also need accomplishments, an accomplishment in your life. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty sophomoric. I think that's pretty basic. Of course, we need accomplishments. The problem with, or where happiness and accomplishment bifurcates, meaning it splits, is we put way too much value on expectation and way too much value on my net worth equals my self-worth. And therefore, when we don't meet that expectation, our happiness is diminished. So the individual who referenced this, the accomplishments can be planting a garden that's successful. Like your tomatoes are beautiful and your squash and your zucchini is fantastic and tastes really good on your salad. I mean, that to me is just as accomplished as what Elon Musk did in sending SpaceX up and back down to the station, to landing on the pad like it did. And because as humans, and because we're influenced by the media and we're influenced by consumerism and materialism, that it's presumed that those accomplishments that equal happiness have to be massive, on a massive scale. And that's a tragedy. That is a travesty. I don't believe that to be the case. I believe it's a source of depression, anxiety in the world today. I happen to be a driven individual who does believe that one, meaning anybody listening to this or watching this, can better their previous best on any day. But just because you don't, and maybe next year's garden isn't as bountiful as this year's garden, it doesn't make you any less accomplished, which therefore shouldn't diminish your sense of happiness. That's easy for me to say. It's hard to implement, because when I fall short of my own expectations, or maybe those created by the media or people that follow me, I can lose some of my happiness. But the first thing that I do, Tio, is I realize that, as at chapter 32, each one of us is blessed with the ability to succeed at some level. But those blessings are not meant for our sole benefit. They're meant to assist others who will likely not succeed at our level. That's chapter 32 of Make It Big, my first book. I know that my legacy will be what we have done in Haiti, what the 12,400 children to date that we've provided self-sustaining existence for. That allows that disappointment or lack of happiness to be a little shorter lived than most.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. I think that accomplishments plays a big role in life, but not it doesn't fit into happiness, because what the end feeling is from accomplishing something is, of course, you become proud of yourself and you become a little bit happy and you become joyful, but you don't get happiness from it. But
No.
what one of the things you get is fulfillment, which is a kind of separate thing than happiness.
Yeah. Yeah, but fulfillment is one of the ingredients to happiness. It definitely is. The problem, though, is with accomplishments is you, like I said, and this is being, almost oxymoronic, you can always better your previous best. So if you've accomplished something, I'm believing I can do a little bit better. But when I don't, then that sense of fulfillment doesn't feel the same, and then I don't feel that great. And so if you can catch that early, and this is really me saying, do as I say, not as I do, because it's hard for me to do that. It's very, very hard for me to do what I just said. We just sold the house, right? And so it's my final masterpiece. And so now what's next? And is it really my final masterpiece? Am I tempted to do a comeback? What will that look like? It's got to look completely different. But I got to sit on those feelings for a while because, I'm used to just making and creating. Shouldn't I give it a break for a while? And I do. I need to. I'm gonna force myself to do that. While I force myself to take a break, what happens, Tio? I'm not accomplishing anything. But am I not? Am I really not? Am I really setting myself up for some greater accomplishment? But it doesn't have to be tomorrow. Now, for somebody who's younger, like you're really young, you shouldn't feel the pressure. My daughter puts a tremendous amount of pressure on herself to accomplish something at 21. And she did before COVID. And now COVID has kind of, as president of that college, she was, like I said, meeting 7 times a day, different meetings everywhere off campus. Now she's kind of stuck at home for 3-4 months. That was really hard on her. And now she's, I'm looking up over across the street because the beach is, she's over at the beach right now. She's enjoying herself like a 21-year-old should be enjoying themselves. Because there'll be time, that upwardly mobile phase, like your prime, you're not even anywhere near your prime. Your prime would probably be 25 to 45 or something like that. That's statistically the case. Maybe not even that great. Maybe 25 to 35 or 25 to 40. So setting yourself up to achieve that prime quicker and to maybe not have to stay in there for 15 years if you chose not to.
Yeah. And I know we are out of time, and I want to thank you, Frank, for taking the time for a third interview. And I hope everyone has enjoyed this interview. And if they want to pick up any of your books, they can go to Frank McKinny. Somewhere in between there should be a hyphen. FrankMcKinney.com.
Frank-McKinney, yeah. Put the hyphen between my first and last name, or Google Frank McKinney, and then just go to my website and, as we say, take a tour of Disney. You can see the houses I've built. You can take a tour of these, like the one I just sold. We just went in the website today and put the word sold on there. It's the first day it's going to show sold. You can tour that house. I was able, but the buyers were allowed me to keep the video up for a little while longer. You can go to Haiti. You can see the villages we built over there. As I said, you can read the sample chapters in the book, and soon you'll be able to learn, what's next. What's the next endeavor.
So there you have it, everyone. Goodbye.